right, good afternoon. Hope you guys are having a wonderful holiday season. It's good to be back for nail school. All right, so today we're going to be focusing on mastering acrylic consistency. All right, so I'm going to be working with cover pink. This pretty much works across the board with most of the acrylic that we work with, but I'm going to be working with a pretty standard color because in order for you to be successful with acrylic, you have to understand how to successfully pick it up and set it down and control the run. All right, so the run is the fancy way, right, of, or pretty much the fancy way of saying product self-levels is it runs all over the place, right? So, we don't, again, want this to discourage you from working with acrylic. We want you guys to be able to master it. And in order to do that, you have to be able to pick this up successfully. So you'll see I have all the monomer inside my dish right here. Notice that I only fill it up about halfway. That way my brush sits inside the dish. It is submersed again up to the bottom of the bristles. You're going to notice that when I lightly tap and I pull down and bounce, I'm going to be able to load my brush on one side of the brush. Okay, so picking up consistent beads, again, is a matter of submersing, lightly tapping, pulling down, bounce, 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 right? So a 3 count on that bounce, you're going to notice I'm going to have a pretty consistent bead. Notice again, if I lightly touch, I pull down, bounce, 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 a 3 bounce, I'm going to get consistency across the board. So if I was working with something, if I was trying to pick up something smaller, if I submerse my brush and let's say I put a lot of pressure, right? Couple big pushes against the side of the dish, you're going to notice that when I pull down, bounce, 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 I'm going to be picking up a bead that is probably half the size of this. Again, submerse, press quite firm, pull down, bounce, bounce, bounce. And again, you're going to notice I'm going to get the same size as this, right? So you're going to see the consistency by, again, lightly tapping, pulling down, bouncing in the powder on one side of the brush, and this is going to give you consistency that is going to, again, not swell around the surface of brush, right? The biggest mistake that a lot of beginners make is, let's say you take your brush and you go like this. Let's say you go, I'm going to remove liquid from this side, this side, this side, this side, this side, this side, this side. You're literally bouncing across all the edges, and then you were taught to water ski across the surface. This, again, looks like you just picked up a booger, right? That is nasty. Again, this is like, you don't want that. You're not going to be able to do anything if you try to drag across the surface. You're going to notice that if I submerse my brush and I load this and I tap, the angle that I'm actually pulling down, I'm pulling back and then bouncing. Pulling back, then bouncing. So lightly pulling back and then bouncing in the powder is going to create a really nice, fluffy, even bead that, again, when I release this off of my brush, it's going to come off without it running all over the place. Okay, so this is what we want to be able to work on so that when we're practicing our overlays, and all the beginners out there that are working with acrylic, the first stage to you being successful with your acrylic is learning to get the product to move from this point to this point in the least amount of effort. Okay, so what I mean by that, you're going to notice, like if I was going to hold this to the side right here, right, you're going to notice fingers pointed down. I don't have it flat like this. If I held the finger flat like this, everything is going to run this way. We don't want it to run this way. We want it to move this way from this point to this point in the least amount of effort. So we need to hold that finger down, pointed down towards the towel. Again, I'm going to use the method of submersing my brush, lightly tapping. I'm going to pull down, bounce, bounce, bounce. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, and then release. This is going to give me the opportunity to lightly touch around the perimeter of the nail as I control the movement of the product from this point to this point. You'll notice that it actually moved a little bit faster on that one side, right? But notice, like, I didn't even touch it. All I'd have to do now at this point is kind of guide this point, right? So that it basically sealed that edge. But what I was able to do is get the product to move from here to here without it running this way. Okay, so if I needed to control it, if I needed to actually prevent it from running or moving that fast, what I'm going to do, let me just go ahead and get a dry wipe, right, to just kind of wipe off that surface, right, so I could show you guys again. Okay, I want to be able, again, to just wait a little bit longer. Okay, so if I submerge my brush, I get myself I get a loaded brush, and then what I'm going to end up doing is pulling down, bounce, bounce, bounce. I'm just going to wait a little bit longer. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. Slowly release. Use the tip of the brush to just kind of guide around. And then notice all I'm doing is kind of holding and using the tip of the brush to kind of guide it as it moves down. At this point, I'll be able to take the tip of the brush and slightly pull from the front end. Again, from the front end, I'm not going to drag the back. What I'll be able to do is control the movement of the acrylic from this point to this point without physically pulling it off the nail. Once it gets down to this point, then as it starts to set, I could use the body of the brush. I could walk it from side to side to create that convex nature, right? And then as it dries, I could dip my brush, I could wipe it, I could get it nice and flat. And then you're gonna notice as I start pulling through the surface, what I'll be able to do is create that nice contour, right? That convex contour with a tight perimeter. Notice here, even if I had ledges, as it starts to set, all I would have to do is just brush those ledges, and I'm not going to have a thick, basically, ledge. A mistake that a lot of beginners make when they are working with acrylic, they'll take the product, let's say you're successful picking this up, okay? And you, again, are not used to the way or positioning the finger like this. What a lot of beginners do is they'll set the finger flat and they'll end up pushing it to the back end like this. And then what ends up happening is you get this mushroom cloud on the back end and end up running down, again, creating this absolute mess that's very, very difficult to work with. What we have to do is position the brush so that all of the product is not basically sticking to the back and running off of the cuticle area. You're going to notice, I'll kind of hold this from the side, but the finger is pointed down and my brush is flat. Do you see that angle, right? We're creating that ledge. If I was to tilt my brush back, it creates that perfect ledge that we have here. So if the finger is actually basically in this position while I set the product down with the bead in front of my brush, I'm going to be able to create the perfect cuticle area just by lightly touching around the perimeter of the nail. So let's go ahead and repeat that process. Notice if I submerge my brush, again, loading it up, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull down and then bounce inside the powder to get myself a nice fluffy round bead. I'm going to count 2, 3, 4, and then again, see how my brush is flat and the finger is pointed? This is naturally, watch this. If I walk around the perimeter of the nail, do you see how it naturally creates that natural? Look at this. If I just pull this corner, I'm going to show you guys something cool. Watch. Forget about the rest of the body. But do you see how it naturally creates that around the perimeter of the nail? If I was just to hold the product here, you're going to notice that it creates basically a ramp, a downward ramp with a tight perimeter around the whole entire surface. This is your basically your technique that you have to master in order for you to be successful so that it doesn't run all over the place. Again, common mistake that a beginner will make. Okay, let's say you're successful picking this up. Let's say you go in and you get yourself a lot of liquid, and then you go in and you're like, oh, wow, I got myself a really, really nice bead. And then what you do is you're like, I'm just gonna set this down, and you make the mistake of doing this. You start to pull it. If you pull it, it not only gets all over your brush, but you literally just pulled everything off of the surface of the nail. This is not what you want to be able to do. You have to remember that in order to build successful shape, right? If this was, again, if the finger is pointed down, right, towards the ground, if this was the natural nail right here, if we were to glue a tip on or sculpt a tip, this back end of the cuticle, what we're trying to create is this. We're trying to create that natural arch with a very, very tight cuticle area. So not just this at the very back end, it needs to be like that around the whole entire perimeter of the nail. And then you're going to create a natural apex, right? A natural thickness through the center of the nail as the product starts to move down towards the perimeter. So again, I always have my students when they're starting to, again, learn how to master picking it up. And what I mean by that is you have to, again, get yourself a nice healthy amount on your brush, lightly tap it. You want to be able to pull down, bounce, 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 get yourself a nice healthy bead. Just take your time and count. 3, 4, 5. Now release. Use the tip of the brush. Just walk around the perimeter to get it tight. Hold it in place. I don't need to pull anything. All I'm doing is walking over the top, kind of guiding it down. Once it gets about halfway from the front of the bead, I can seal the natural nail, being very light with my pressure. And then as it starts to dry, I can now use, again, the body of my brush to walk it over the top and create that natural overlay, right? And then again, as it starts to set, I can go back in my dish, I can kind of clean my brush, and then if I choose to pull through the surface as everything is drying, I'm going to be able to really create that beautiful, natural, easy to file, basically coating over the surface of the natural nail that's going to lead to perfection when you're done finishing. Okay? All right, so some basic fundamentals for you guys to be able to work on, some technical skills you're gonna be able to master by learning how to submerge, lay down, how to set, right? Count, walk around, get yourself a nice, tight, flush perimeter. If you guys have any questions, hit us up. Again, for information on education, get a hold of Ray Bracamontes here at home office. If you guys need information, again, you can go to YouTube. It is fully loaded with unlimited amounts of videos that are going to be able to help you guys at Young Nails Inc. And then if you guys need any information, upcoming Zoom classes, get a hold of Ray Bracamontes here at home office, 1-800-777-9170. And then www.youngnails.com. Always here to help. I hope this helped. You guys can always get a hold of us. We're here to help you guys get better. Have yourself a wonderful day. Love you guys much. I'll see you guys soon. Peace.
Subscribe the channel now. Subscribe the channel now. Subscribe to the channel now. Subscribe to the channel